Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. Today here in the studio, I'm very thrilled to have my guests to talk about something that you don't hear much about in the popular press unless it's really bad news, and that is prison ministry. What are we doing for the people that are incarcerated and for their victims and the families of victims and also the families of the inmates themselves? Those are some of the things that we want to discuss today, and we have the right people, I hope, at the right time. On my immediate left, I'd like to introduce Father Ricardo Russo, a Franciscan priest who is the chaplain at the state prison. And to his left is Ann Edenfield of Logos Associates, and she's going to have a lot to say about the people outside the prison whose loved ones are in. And my old friend, Brother Regis White of the College of Santa Fe, a Christian brother who has had a long, extensive career in working in prison ministry, particularly in the education department. So welcome all of you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Bill.
I'd like to start with you, Father Ricardo, as the chaplain. A lot of people on the outside don't think too much about inmates' spiritual needs and the rest of it, but as we all know, we all have spiritual needs, and I would imagine they would be even more important when they're behind bars.
Well, as you know, some of the idea behind the penitentiary was connected with the early monastic practice. This is where a lot of people did their penance for the major sins. We might call them the capital sins. So this is certainly linked with doing penance and putting order back into one's life. So today, as you know, we have a facility out there that houses approximately 1,000 people. Many of these people are there for a various and variety filled sins, if you will. And the reason behind coming to a penitentiary is to both re-educate and reevaluate where the soul is going. And so it's a very interesting way to do ministry. And in a sense, many of the people that are there are brothers and sisters, and because of this, we have a responsibility to not only serve them, but to help them along, not only at the penitentiary, but even after their time is done there. So I bring that to you because in the early days, penitentia came from the Latin word of penance itself. And the walls around the penitentiary were put there so that the world could not come in. The walls around the penitentiary today are put there so that those who are inmates cannot go out. But one wonders if spirituality cannot bloom and even blossom in such a place, as indeed it has with many individuals. They come out there from the penitentiary many times highly spiritually evolved. And perhaps in God's own divine providence, these people are placed in a situation where graces can really begin to flow through them, whereas if they were on the outside, perhaps they would have lost a chance or been distracted from the chance of God getting their attention. So I do this in conjunction with 180 volunteers who come in and serve all branches of religion, the Islamic, the Native Americans, all Christian groups. We have groups there that come out and practice Buddhism. These are all spiritual exercises that can help, and we're always in need of volunteers. We're always in need of people who would be willing to share their time and their spiritual knowledge with these people that are evolving in their own life. Many people think the idea behind a penitentiary is pure punishment. In fact, sometimes society gets this idea that it should merely punish. But you see, time away from your family and the community is itself punishment. And I think once they begin to realize that there are options and opportunities for them, many people do come back to the community as better individuals. So that is part of my ministry.
That's great. I want to get to other guests, but I can't resist with a follow-up question here because I know the state has other concerns. Their job is to protect the populace under the health and safety mandate, and some of these people are actual threats to people on the outside. What is it that people on those of us outside and those at home watching the show, what is it they can do to help you in your work, help these inmates, help perhaps even prevent them from getting there in the first place? What needs to be done?
Recently we developed a card program in which they would maintain connections with their families and those who are many times shame-based on the outside, who are reluctant to admit that they have a son or a daughter in prison, because how this will play in the community. And of course, the Christian community is sent out for those who are sick, not for those who are in need of don't feel their need for a doctor. And in many ways, this is an opportunity for people to respond by finding out the needs of the programs there and how they can contribute. We have many Islamics that need, for example, the Quran supplied to them, which certainly could fit well into their budget. And we have Native Americans who practice in the sweat lodge and need many religious articles that, again, have to have funding to provide. And so there are many resources that can be allotted there. Mothers that are behind bars is a program that we have there. And the Vietnam veterans, for example, many who have served in Vietnam, many who have ended up in prison, wish to establish some kind of connection with what they were, again, at one time privileged to share. Mm-hmm. And so there are many ways in which people on the outside can certainly contribute. And one of the leading persons behind this is Antonio Martinez at Post Office Box 1059, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505. And you can connect him at 827-8200, extension 8332.
Who is he,
And
Father?
he is a coordinator of many of the programs that are out there at the penitentiary.
Okay, I'll ask you to repeat that number at the end of the show so they can get a hold of him. Now I want to introduce your friend Ann Edenfield, who we've just met, who has a very interesting work, and I'd like to have you tell us about it.
Sure, I'd love to talk about it. I work for a youth program called Logos System Associates, Logos being the Greek word for the word. And we started a pilot project in Albuquerque for families of prisoners based on the Logos model, which is where the early disciples got together and they did 4 things. They sang, they ate together, and had fellowship together. Of course, they did Bible study, and they had fun together. And so that's the model for the Logos program. We're in 25 different denominations all over the world. But we knew that there was a real need for the families of prisoners. Oftentimes, families of prisoners feel like they're islands to themselves. They aren't welcome in churches. The inmates have people that come into the prisons that work with them and minister to them. Oftentimes, the families don't feel welcome in the congregations. And so we've started a pilot project that goes 3 times. We do 3 parties a year. We do a Christmas, an Easter, and a back to school, with the goal of connecting those folks to the Christian community. And we've had up to 14 different denominations participating with us, over 44 congregations working together. It's such a beautiful ecumenical outreach. And our goal is to have them get to know us, get to know people that are in churches within their local geographic area. We realize that if they get to know me and I live 20 miles from where they live, they're not going to come to my church. So our goal is to connect them to a church in their neighborhood, have them get involved with the church, and hopefully come to know Christ that way. And we try to open up the hearts and the minds of all the members of the congregations in the community. And so we do this party called Wings, like angel wings, lifting up the folks and letting them know that there are people out there that care about them.
All right, that's great. Tell us just a quick moment about the children of inmates. I imagine they have particular problems in terms of their own involvement as a person, knowing that their father or mother is behind bars. Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. We are particularly concerned about those children, and that's why we do this program. Children of inmates are 6 times more likely to end up in prison than anyone else. In America today, over 2 million Americans are in prison. We incarcerate more people than Russia or China. And I have been into prisons in Russia, all over Russia, youth detention centers and women and male prisons. And yet I have been to the prison at Santa Fe, and the conditions, unfortunately, sometimes are not too much different. And we need to reach out and keep our people out of prisons. So if we can do something for these children, make them know that there are places where they are welcome, and connect the mothers as well, because oftentimes it's the mothers. 98% of inmates are male, and so who's taking care of these children but the moms and the grandmas, and we need to support them. Oftentimes they don't feel welcomed into the churches, and so we need to have them find church homes where they can be welcome. We are working very, very hard to get our church community also open to working with what oftentimes they say the least of these, and people that, oh, I don't know if we want to be around these children or prisoners, and they are ostracized in our schools and other parts of our community. And so we invite the youth from all the surrounding churches and the adults also to come from the churches. And pretty soon they come to a party and they realize they can't tell who's a family member of an inmate or not. And so it's a wonderful outreach. And hopefully these kids are going to grow up and want to go into the prisons and want to go into other ministries too.
Oh, that's great. I want to come back to that in a minute, but I also want to get Brother Regis in here because he represents an education system that was there and doing good work and reducing that recidivism rate dramatically. So I'd like to give Brother Regis a chance to share some of his experience.
I like the introduction Father Russo gave, that one of the functions of the prison work was retention. Another one was the renovation. And the education program that the College of Santa Fe pursued at the Penitentiary of New Mexico was focused particularly on the question of renovation. What can you do to a man so that when he comes out he is a better person, ready to re-enter society? To emphasize that, I'd like to refer to Rudolph Aller's work on self-improvement. And these folks have already touched on this in a little bit different point of view. But one of the things that Aller says in self-improvement is, it is not enough to assent to an idea. That is, yeah, I'll buy that idea. And many of the folks who are incarcerated will confront you with that very nice stories saying, I buy all these nice ideas. That is good. But Aller says we have to go one step further with an assent that says, I buy it enough that I'm going to do something about it. And that is what the education program at the college, at the penitentiary through the College of Santa Fe focused on, trying to move people from just saying nice things to the point that they were willing to do nice things. How do you do that? And here's, that's right, said, we need to do with the mind and the heart. And I want to emphasize we have to add one other thing, the will. The education program at the penitentiary focused on academic things, but approaching them from the point of view, how do you influence the mind of the person? How do you influence the heart of the person and the will of the person? Allers interestingly says, you're not going to get to the heart until you become convinced in your mind. And then he moves over into the point of behavior. We have to get people to behave in such a sense that they don't become paranoid about observing what they are doing. Like the young man who was on prison release to study at the college, he became so paranoid about his behavior that he got on top of a sales store and tried to get in. Not to get in and take something, but so he could be put back in prison because he was afraid of his behavior. We have to move them along in observing their behavior in a productive manner, but so that they look at the results. What kind of behavior begets certain kinds of results? St. John Baptist de La Salle, who started our organization, focused on that because years ago, this is back in the 1680s, he had prisoners within his school confines. And one of the emphases he made was treat them nicely, but always have a progressive program so that if you do this and your behavior is that which is acceptable, you go one step up in the operation. For example, he would allow them to have a bird in a cage in their private room, and then the next step they'd be allowed to do something else. So with Allers, we go through those kinds of things. And one of the emphases is, and that was very evident in the program at the penitentiary, all of this takes time. You cannot say, well, that's good, I'm going to behave that way, and 2 days later it's going to work. From an experiential point of view, we found this, that prisoners who worked in the education program for at least 2 years and went on release then, the rate of recidivism of that type of individual was 5%. Now that might not be too meaningful to you if you haven't had much contact with the penitentiary. The regular rate of recidivism, at least the last I was able to check it, was 65%. That's a big gap in there between 5% and 65%. And it was because of the time. Now these were not numbers that we conjured up just to be nice. We went through the federal correction system to find out what was happening to these men for this reason. The federal corrections keeps track of people from the penitentiary programs in all states of the United States. The correctional program in New Mexico, because we're more restricted, keeps track of people who leave and are living in New Mexico. So over the whole United States, our rate of recidivism was about 5%. What were these people doing? Some of them worked for the state. There's one of the persons who left the penitentiary program, now holds a doctor's degree and works in the social services programs of the state of New Mexico. So we feel that that has been a good result. It has also been a good result for the young people studying at the College of Santa Fe, because a number of them on their own have gone out to work in the penitentiary program, to work with the residents out there, and subsequently have moved on into working with them out of the penitentiary system. One of them, Judy Paparazzi, was a lawyer, subsequently because of her interest in the prison program, working in Maryland. We have one of the ladies here, Annabelle Romero, is a local lawyer who works directly with the penitentiary program to help on law cases. So we feel that overall an educational program where people move to accept things and be willing to implement them in what they do is going to be effective. Mm-hmm. I would like to recommend one further thing. And here we run into the problem that the legislature faces, and that is the question of funding. One of the things that would be most successful to men leaving the penitentiary program, whether they've been in an educational program or just inmates at the place, would be a follow-up with their parole officers. Now, I have not been able to ascertain exactly the ratio of patrol officers to residents at the present time, but it would be economically to the advantage of the state to establish a program wherein one patrol officer has a relationship with 9 to 10 men.
You mean parole officer?
Yeah,
okay.
Parole officer with 9 to 10 men. Now you say, why that? If we look at Seminoff's study, Seminoff is an eminent psychiatrist out on the East Coast. One of his major books is The Criminal Mind. And he had written about what you can do to help people refrain from crime in the future. He said, I will not work with more than 9 men. But he kept a very close count of what the men did. Every day they reported to him. They reported in the morning, where are you going? They reported in the evening, what did you do? When you went by the bank, what did you think of? When you saw that nice looking lady there, what did you think of? When you saw the car sitting there with the keys in and the motor running, what did you think of? And over a period of about 2 years, these men completely turned around. Now that is the seed that I am talking about. If in our state we had that relationship of 1 officer to 9 men, they can meet with them and help them to redirect their minds, their hearts, and their wills. Now immediately comes up the question, that's expensive. Well, what is more expensive? To have 100 people on parole, 65% of whom are going to go back in, or to have 9 people on parole, none of whom going to go back in? You're saving $25,000 every time a man does not go back in that penitentiary. Not only are you saving dollars, these men are working productively, they're taking care of their families, they're paying their income tax. And I say it is something that you have to do, and it costs to get it started. But in the long run, the state would benefit, and the people involved would benefit even more.
Thank you, Brother Reese. That was excellent. I'd like to get your comments on either one of you, Father, on Brother Regis' suggestions.
Well, I'm in the spiritual end of things, but I do know about all these other things. And I think the most important thing that he said was that the one-on-one relationship with a parole officer is certainly significant. And it's better to continue in that vein than to house an inmate at the penitentiary for $32,000 a year. That certainly is true. But the broader scope of who is the parole officer. And I would like to suggest that the community should certainly take more responsibility for its own, because the state penitentiaries house the sons and daughters of New Mexicans, many of whom are in there sometimes for a violent crime, sometimes for a crime that is nonviolent. You can do time for a bad check, a $25 bad check. And you can do time, of course, for robbing a bank. Sometimes those people are both put in the same territory. And certainly if those demarcations were, I think, looked at in a better way, that would certainly help the situation. But if the community, if the, for example, the church community took a better account of its citizens and again worked with them, I think many of these things would reduce recidivism as we know it. So I certainly think we have to take more of a lead in that regard. But I want to also say something about victims, because I think sometimes victims are left out of the grand picture of things. I think as a community and a church, we also should have regard for certainly the victims and initiate programs for the victims. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but inmates do pay 15% of their income that they make in the penitentiary to a fund that goes back to the victims. And albeit that is not perhaps a great deal of money, it is a chance for them to say something monetarily, that they are sorry for what they've done, and they certainly are trying to make restitution for this. And that is not said enough. And that is in line there and was produced in 1990 by the legislature, so that the victims also would be heard in this greater spectrum of things. So again, it gets back to the spiritual needs of a community, because I think all of this rests in violation of an ordered life. And because of this, people do time. And as a spiritual leader for the prison population, I like to suggest that God is ordered. And when we lead an ordered life with responsibility to those that live around us, then our life becomes happier. We become a happier people because we're putting into our own lives the godly life. And because of that, then we recognize the needs of all, and then we can live in community. And I think that's what so often brings people into the prison population. For one reason or another, people are addicted. And they're addicted perhaps because it does give them relief for a time, but only for a time, because it's a great lie. Then they go back to the addiction, back to the addiction. And then where does my ego end and yours begin? And this is a great problem in the penitentiary system, as well as in society, I might add, where people are often overlooked and pushed aside. Where does my ego end and where does yours begin? I don't think it's just a psychological issue. I think it's a very spiritual issue, because if the God life is in us, then we are more likely to respond to that and hold those things to be sacred, to where people then will not cross those boundaries that society so often has put there for the benefit of all. So it is indeed both a problem and a challenge. A challenge in that how can we become better people? And a problem in that so many go to addictions of all kinds to escape the reality that life sometimes can challenge us to grow. And if we do not take the challenge, then we run the risk of breaking laws. And that is something that the spiritual community has to address.
All right, thank you, Father. We've run out of time. We just have a couple more minutes, but I just want you to know I'm honored to be here with you three people, and I know you represent a lot more people out there who have dedicated their lives for a spiritual reason of your own to serve your fellow man in difficult situations. So on behalf of everybody watching and here, I want to thank you for the work that you're all doing.
Thanks.
I'd like to give you guys an opportunity then to plug the organizations, to request donations or support for your work. Why don't you start and refresh their memory what it is the organization does really quickly, and give them a phone number or something and where they can give in this season.
Okay, Logo System Associates. You can contact me in Albuquerque, 291-6412. Any donations would be welcome to help continue the ministry, trying to reach out to the families of the prisoners.
And there's also opportunities for people to get involved, to volunteer in your group too,
Call
right?
me. There are 3 parties a year. There are Logos churches, many all over New Mexico. Many ways to get involved.
That's great. Brother Regis, one last word from you.
Well, I would just encourage the ordinary citizens of New Mexico to use their vote to support the things of education and prisoner release in the state, because they are your people and it is your money that's being expended.
That's good. So people at home, you feel free to call your legislature, call the governor, tell them what you feel. If this has enlivened you in any way or you feel called to act, please stay tuned for the credits, watch the phone numbers there. Let your voice be heard, and also contribute with your time and energy and finances if you can for the benefit of all of us. So again, on behalf of everybody here at Spirituality, I appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedules to come in and share with all of us at home, and I wish you well and God bless in your work.
Well, thank you, Bill.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you. So on behalf of everyone here at Spirituality, I want to thank you for viewing, and tell your friends about it and encourage them to do something good for themselves, their family, and for their fellow citizens, either by getting involved, certainly remember them in your prayers, and to encourage others to participate as well. So on behalf of everybody here, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and thank you for viewing, and look for us next week for another segment on spirituality. Sit still.